So, welcome back, everyone, to the History of Gear, where we talk about the past, present, and future of the outdoor industry. Um, Excited to have our next guest, Steve McDonald, joining us today. I really enjoyed talking to Steve over the last few years, getting to know him, getting to know his work, and really excited to have you here. Steve is a incredible designer whose impact can be felt. It's so many different brands across the industry: Nike, ACG, Considered, Fila Outdoors, Apple, Under Armour, Esprit. I'm sure I'm missing a number of brands. You've done work with Merrill and a number of other companies, but appreciate having you here. And thanks for being willing to talk today.
Oh, thank you, Chase. I look forward to talk to you.
Well, your work is amazing. And if anyone who has seen your designs already knows, and I know that a number of our students are getting introduced to your work because you donated some of your work here to the archive, which first of all, thank you for that. It's already had an amazing impact on our students, but we
Oh, I'm
want to
glad they
kind of
look at it.
they definitely look at it and they're inspired by everything you've done. But I want to go way back to before Nike, before Fila, before Apple. What was your connection to the outdoors? When did you first? We just before we started recording, we were talking to cross country skiing, which you still do. When did you first discover your passion and interest in outdoor activities?
Oh boy, I came from Rose Park, which is just slightly west, right of downtown Salt Lake City, right part of the capital there. So my dad was pretty poor, but he used to work in worked in Phillips Petroleum or something, I think, in Bountiful, and we couldn't have enough money to do a lot of sports. So what we did a lot of baseball, and my dad started as a ski patroller, a free. He did a volunteer ski patroller, so he had to go every weekend, Saturday and Sunday. So that means we had to go ski with my dad, and we were only like 10 years old or 11 years old. So I skied every weekend on Saturday and Sunday. So I got to be pretty good skier, and I loved it. And I also loved baseball, and I still do. And I started climbing. Actually, I started that actually when I was only 11 years old. I climbed around our grandparents' house. I could travel the whole thing without touching the ground, but just by climbing the whole thing. So from that point, I started to love everything outside, climbing or golf or uh, alpine sports. Or in fact, I was a snowboarder, and I'm not a snowboarder, but I mean a skateboarder. And I actually had my own another friend, and myself. We sold ski some boards, snow or skateboards in the Salt Lake City area. So anyway, um,
Yeah. When did so I guess where would you ski? Where were your favorite places to
oh,
ski
good
and
question.
climb?
Because my dad was with Brighton
Uh-huh.
Resort, so
Yeah.
that's the place we had to ski every. So I was kind of snooty back then. It's like I didn't like Alta back then because we thought we were from Brighton. So eventually I started liking all the Alta, and they became good friends too. And I got to do into some the world's championship competition they had for freestyle, and I was allowed to free, what do you call that, the free jump. So that means I had to free in front of everybody for the competition. So I had to be the young guy to go do flips in front of everybody, and that was a real highlight for me back then. It was pretty cool.
When was that? When you were a teenager, you did that?
Yeah, that's 76, 75, and 76. I did a lot
Okay.
of, and then I did a lot of freestyle in both. I was a mogul skier, and I used to I won a few years of mogul skiing. And in fact, back then I won the ballet, the moguls, and aerials, all three of them. So I was kind of lucky. But after that, I had a friend broke his neck in 1976, I think it is. and it just changed everything. It completely changed uh, freestyle skiing because they stopped everybody. You couldn't do flips anymore. They wouldn't let me do any flips back then, or even helicopters, or they wouldn't allow to do that. So it changed the whole company. So I decided I wasn't going to be a freestyle skier anymore, and wanted to be an architect after there. And so I had a friend. He got me a job working for his dad. He was an architect, so I had to be a draftsman. So I did learn to be a pretty good draftsman, and I became to fall in love with architecture back then. So I wanted to be an architect. So I went to University of Utah and uh, tried to go into architecture. Went for a year of that, and then I realized I had to have two full years of calculus in architecture, and I was terrible at math. So I said, I'm not going to be. I guess can't be an architect. So I decided to be an industrial designer. So I got a scholarship to the Art Center College of Design, and that's where I went there for 3 years at the Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and it was an incredible school back then, or maybe it is still today. But it was hardcore working. Like, in fact, we would work one class a day, which is really bizarre. Just one, and you go from 8 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, and then you have another different class the next day. So we didn't do any work actually on those classes. So that means we had to work the day after. So usually I pretty much worked till 3 in the morning every day. And then it was super hardcore, but incredibly fun. And I was lucky to win a competition at the Art Center College of Design for a frog design competition. And frog design is basically connected to Apple, and Steve worked with Steve Jobs. And so I won that competition I did some ski boot poems. And so I actually built my own boot and everything out of Clark foam out of it. And maybe I'll show some pictures of that later. And it was super fun to work with. And the other guy that was I won first place, and the second place was from Grant Larson, and he was the guy that designed eventually the Porsche Boxster right after that too. Wow. So I had a lot of incredibly talented designers that I worked with there. So I was lucky to learn a lot from other smart people.
Well, that's a good lesson for our students is learn from your peers, because you don't always know who you're working next to and working with in school, but then also when you go out to industry, there's amazingly talented people, and especially in school, you might see the seeds of that, but also you don't know what people's career trajectories are going to be. So that's amazing that you got to work with some really amazing people. Even
it is. I actually learned more from other students more than from the actual, the whole.
Yeah. I'm going to go back a little bit. So you mentioned, I read a little bit on your LinkedIn profile, and I like how you described your experience at the University of Utah. You said you graduated magna cum laude in skiing. That's true.
Yeah, I don't know. I think even today, I'm trying to actually work really hard, and I was kind of a workaholic, but I also played a lot.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, I like to do all kinds of other stuff. So
yeah.
Even all those days in Art Center College of Design, we used to go to Joshua Tree and go rock climbing there too, and tried to do a lot of surfing up by Newport there, Balboa Beach, and it was good times. And even today, I probably play just as much as I did back then.
Yeah. So work-life balance, how does that, did you feel like you were able to ever achieve that? Is work-life balance possible, or is it work hard, play hard?
Yeah, I think it was lucky to have to if you work for a good company, and I worked for a different really good company for Apple, and I worked for Nike, and for Esprit. I worked for Doug Tompkins at Esprit. That was probably the best job I've ever had, but the most
Yeah.
difficult job
Yeah.
by a long shot on that one.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It's
I
helpful when you work with other people who like to play. I'm sure that that makes the balance between the work and the play a little easier because there's the culture of, getting outside as well. But I wanted to ask another question about your time at Art Center. Um, well, maybe just more of a comment. You've very generously donated your work from school, as well as some of your professional work to the archive here at Utah State. Um, your handwriting is incredible. It's so beautiful.
thank you.
Our
That's
students who
as you're a draftsman, you get to be pretty good at it.
I was gonna say, so I want to go even back further. Of course, like you started to develop this skill set as a draftsman. Did you notice any like creative ability or creative interest before you got into working as a draftsman? Like, did you have any creative hobbies? Where did that creativity come from for you?
Well, my dad was a draftsman, draftsperson back then. So I kind of always looked up to my dad too back then because he used to draw really well. His both his sketching and his writing was impeccable. So I wanted to do even better. You want to do even better than your dad. So uh, I just think I think being a draftsman, you become your core of you're kind of you're kind of the grunt person. I have to do a lot of the stuff that nobody wants to do. So in a way, you have to look at it in a Zen way to doing the work. Like I had to do to door jams drawings and stuff like that forever that were boring, but you want to do it really well. And if you look at it, if you really care about what you're doing, then you'll do a better job of it, and you feel a little bit, I don't know, you're more satisfying to do better work.
Do you feel like that was kind of a foundation of your work? I hadn't made this connection before, but to your point of being a draftsman and having to do the grunt work and the details, do you feel like you were able to carry that through your work throughout your career, that attention to detail and that focus on, taking something that may be very mundane or maybe a quote unquote boring product or something that's maybe not as exciting as some people might think, through your design and your attention to detail, you're able to make something mundane look beautiful. Is that accurate or something that resonates with you?
Yes, it's even more than that. I think nowadays it seems like a lot of the shoes are more about how cool that they look. And with me, it's more about everything about the shoe. It's more about that's why I chose to be a shoe designer instead of because I worked for Apple and computers, but it's pretty boring to do plastic boxes. but a shoe, it's amazing. It's part of the the center of the culture around there, and it's athletic. It's it has to be per high performance. It has to fit well, and it has that same one design has to fit well and work if it's size 5 to size 15, and
Mhm.
it's a total different project because if it's a size 15, all the materials work completely different. It's going to want to stretch and break out all the problems. Or if you're in a kid's size 5 or size 3, it's way too stiff because all your materials are way thick. It's way too thick. So you have to completely change every product. That's what I loved about shoe design. It's not just the style. I mean, even in hoops, it is important. It's important how it looks because it's got to be beautiful. But you look at it and you have to understand it. Go like, I know that's high
Yeah.
performance.
Yeah. I have another question about your time at Art Center, or even before that. Um, a lot of people, even today, are unfamiliar with the field of industrial design, um, let alone students. I think there's a lot of people out there who they want to design physical things, they want to make products, but they don't know what that person is called. And maybe that's a challenge of the name industrial design in general. I've heard that from a few people that maybe there's a branding problem or a naming problem with industrial design. But how did you discover industrial design? You're a draftsman. Like, how did you learn about Art Center and learn that there are physical product designers out there? Do you remember how that came about?
Well, I think I talked a little bit about when I started to be an architect. So I learned a lot about architecture, and I looked a little bit into industrial design, and I thought, why would I want to do that? Because who cares about creating how an iron looks like or something? But after a while, I kind of realized that actually I care about everything that you create, every kind of product, and technically everything is industrial design if you understand the whole bigger picture of the smaller details and also the bigger picture of how it fits in the culture.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's super fun, and it's the thing that's so fun about industrial design. You're creating a product that's going to be you're going to create it right now, and it's probably going to be sold 6 months later. Where if I work in architecture, you work for 4 or 5 years for a project or something, and then they don't actually build it for another 3 or 4 years. So it's 7 years in the future, and I don't know, it doesn't. Most architecture is pretty bad anyway out there. If you look at it, most of it's pretty boring, and there's some fantastic architecture as well. But industrial design, there's a lot of bad industrial design as well too. I don't know. I kind of look up right back then. I started to really look up to the Japanese and the Germans, and eventually now I look up to the Thailand people and in China, just because they're mind thinking. They're thinking of the bigger picture of things.
Hmm.
Um, in fact, I'm learning so much from here, and I think the things that's happening right now in China, I totally look up to them. They're they're way ahead of us, and I want to learn more from them
Yeah.
right now.
Well, so you win this competition, and that gets you an internship with Frog or a position.
That's exactly what happened to that. So I won the competition. I got to work to move to Campbell, California, which we call Camp Hell, which is right in the Silicon Valley. And Frog Design did all the Frog Design was the industrial design of all of Apple back then.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because Steve Jobs hired Frog Design to be all the main industrial design. And in fact, I got the job there, and the first job I did was to create the extended uh, keyboard for Apple. And the reason I got the job is because I had two other guys that were even better than me. They were better designers, and they created a keyboard that was even much more beautiful and much super thin and everything. But what happened is the management or the marketing people completely stopped that new design, and they wanted it to be all based on old the German what's it what is it their standards for the German standards. So it said to say that every keyboard had to be really high, had a specific shape, and it had to fit on women that had really long fingernails and all of that. So we had to design it that way. And so my other friends, they quit on that project, and I had to finish the project based on the DIN standard, German standards within that. So I was part of why Steve Jobs got fired, not for me, necessarily to me, but because Steve Jobs actually fought for us. He cared. He really liked really good design. And so he fought for us to make this really flat keyboard, and even we had the computers and even smaller, oh, just laser printers and things like that. They had all kinds of different things that were amazing, but meant the Apple kind of stopped that whole thing, and they fired him because he was fighting for us. And Steve Jobs, I really liked him, but he could be a kind of a jerk. If he didn't like somebody, he could be very demeaning to different people, and that's not cool. But in other ways, he had a charisma. When he talked, everybody listened, and it was pretty cool to work for Steve Jobs back then.
It sounds like a really interesting time to be working at the company because you started at Frog in is it 85?
That's right.
85?
85, 86, 87.
Yeah. And
Here.
then it looks like Steve Jobs was fired at like 86 or something. So you're right in the middle
Yes.
of that. Wow.
Yes. Yeah. was, and so it was kind of nasty within that thing. And so I actually got a seal work with Steve Jobs for Next, for his own company out there. So we still had a good connection with Steve Jobs back then. So it was fun to work for the Next company as well.
Mhm.
Um, and then,
What were some of your what were some of the other products that you worked on? I know on your portfolio and on LinkedIn you have Steve's cell phone, 19 I think in 87. So early cell phone concepts.
yeah,
What
well, you know what? In Frog Design, they had a lot of times where we could just create anything we wanted to design.
yeah.
So I created that induction iron. So induction iron means you could take the iron, you had to put it over the top here, and it didn't work until you touched it together. Then it heated it all together and pulled it over, and those were phenomenal. They were really cool, and I did that iPhone, and we didn't call it an iPhone. We just wanted to do it for a phone. We said we should do a future phone, and I wanted to make a really small version of it, so the same shot size of it. So back then we couldn't do a monitor on there because monitors were huge. They were big. So I did no monitor within that. So it pretty much, it's the exact same size and shape. Eventually became the iPhone. And so that doesn't mean I had anything to do necessarily with iPhone, but I think means everybody is part of it. If you're helping, I don't know. In fact, one of the things that the Art Center College of Design, one of my projects at Art Center College of Design, I wanted to do a future version of a Volkswagen Beetle. So I did my whole design and sketch of what the new future um, Beetle. And one of the other guys was working. He was one of my students. He became one of the main designers over at Audi, and he designed the Beetle. And that means he was probably inspired from, because he was there and I talked to him back then. He was inspired the idea of a future Beetle, and he did a much better version of it here. But it's cool. Everything's connected too, and I really like that, and I like that about Nike too, where
Yeah.
we had to be connected with everyone.
So at that point, eventually you go and work for Doug Tompkins. How does that transition happen from Frog Design, which is very industrial design, to you end up working for Doug, which is apparel, it's textiles, it's very different in some ways from kind of your industrial design role. How do you get connected with Doug and work for Esprit?
That's a very good question here, because actually back then in the 80s, is Tompkins and Steve Jobs were really good friends, and they had a party together here in San Francisco, the area, and they were they were connected. And I think Doug Tompkins basically connected. Uh, I think Steve Jobs knew me, and so he talked to Doug Tompkins said, you should get Steve McDonald in here. So Doug Tompkins called me, and because I had already quit frog design and I was doing my own product, my own company. It was MC3, it was called. And the Doug Tompkins hired me to be the head of their industrial design within Esprit, and it was an incredible job too. Where we had to travel everywhere. I had to go to Philippines, to Taiwan, to Korea, and Japan, and France, and Italy. So it was kind of wild. Plus, I had to go 4 times a day to New York City at the time too. So I climbed a lot too. So I'd go work in New York City and then go into the Shwangunks and climb, because the Shwangunks is only like 2.5 hours or something. Right next, you could drive from Manhattan into the Shwangunks area. It was a gorgeous area.
So what was kind of your vision at Esprit? What did you and Doug want to create? What did you want to bring to market? What did you design there?
Well, this is probably it's a long story here, so I can't tell you the whole story, but I'll tell you a little bit more. And that is, Doug Tompkins is and was he's an ecologist, and so he believed in deep ecology. And it's kind of a hard name because everybody thinks, what do you mean by deep ecology? And all he means by deep ecology is not just one little thing about, oh, let's recycle stuff. It's more about everything is connected, and you have to understand that and try to take care of the planet. And if you're going to make a product, then try to make it safer and a little bit more sustainable, even though there's no such thing as sustainable with it. But you should be able to take care of everything. And as an industrial designer, I try to understand all of that thing and try to do my best job with Esprit. And it was phenomenal. I think even today, I think people laugh at you because I think that way, but I think even more that way about we should take care of stuff and do. In fact, if I'm going to make a product, I don't want to make a crummy product you're going to just throw away, or it's toxic, or it was, so that's how I tried to help Nike in the future. Mm-hmm. And that's probably why I eventually got pushed out of Nike, because I thought about ecology. And the people in Nike actually really cared about it. In fact, the people in Asia were amazing they cared about making more money by making less toxic stuff and less have the material or the actual materials to be better. I mean, I could tell you a better story about what's happened here, because the people in Taiwan and China and Thailand. In fact, I loved working with Thailand because when I would come there, I would create all my tech packets. And the tech packets, every drawing, I would have all cross sections, all of it. I had actual material, every material, and I would have specifically what it would cost and what it would weigh, the weight of it, and I knew everything about it. So when I would show that to the people, and the people in Asia would look at it. They didn't look at me like, they would be inspired, like, whoa, this guy knows so much stuff. I want to do it they want to do it even better. So the people in Thailand, they would do exactly what I asked them to do. I would do my drawings, and I'd say, do the model. And they would also do the model. But then I would say, I actually asked them, I said, if you could do it even better, do it better. Show it to me. So a few times they did it that was better than mine. So I said, well, let's do it. And so we worked together as a collaboration, and we made, in fact, everybody looked up back then, they look up to Nike being the highest level of innovation. And I was part of it. And there were a lot of other really talented people at Nike that we were way ahead of everybody here. I don't think it is now. There's some really good people at Nike, but I don't see that much that blows my mind.
Yeah. Well, you talk a lot about deep ecology and sustainability, and that word means a lot of different things to a lot of people. Um, what are the practices that you started to implement at Esprit that you all felt were more responsible or more sustainable, for lack of a better term? Like what were you doing at that time to make product more responsibly?
Uh, it's good. I think there's a guy that you should read about. His name is Arnie Ness, and Arnie Ness. You'll hear two names. Arnie Ness. There's another Arnie Ness. He was also the head of Norway, and his name is Arnie Ness because he was his son. So the older Arnie Ness, he started deep ecology, and he was a rock climber. He was a climber his whole life, and he was also a skier. And so he did so much outdoor that he thought he actually understood and cared a lot more about uh, the whole planet too. And so he even believed a lot more about Spinoza, Brock Spinoza. If you've ever read that, I won't tell more about that, but that's totally worth reading about that. Um, I don't know what else were your
Yeah,
exact.
are there any specific things that you did working at Esprit that kind of made designing product more in line with these principles of deep ecology? Are there manufacturing processes or the way you designed things to make product more responsible or sustainable?
Yeah, and so I didn't. With Esprit, instead of actual materials, I did have really good materials that were a little bit more recyclable material, or it's a better material. Or with Esprit, when I had to create, for instance, I had to do probably the number one product that they sold was just these bags that just said Big Esprit on the side of here. So instead, I created, it still said Esprit, but I also had I had some little woman that she wrote some really good little memes and little writing all over it, and I stuck it on the outside of the the bag. So if you're sitting here, like, you're going to start reading all these little things, and some of the interesting things are very cool about, like, uh, is talking about. Did you ever talking about the sun's outside, or why is that tree is still growing? And hey, they're both conscious beings there, and I mean, there's all kinds of really interesting things where you to make people to just start thinking about everything, and they're all connected in every way. So I did stuff like that, and um, and also I started doing it where I was trying to travel less because I was traveling way too much, and I was spending, or I was it was I wasn't very responsible that way. So I tried to start to do back then, because that was the beginnings of the internet there. So I had to try to connect to each other more on emails and texting, and because that was where it started there. Because if you think about it, there was no iPhones or any connection, but fax. I don't know. You guys don't even know what a fax is, do you? Back
I
then,
do. I
yeah.
do. I've used a fax machine one time when I worked for a bank going
Yeah.
while I was going to school, but that was the only time.
So everything was fax back then. So I was talking to all the people in China. That in fact, we actually did the very very first um, computer faxed computer, where we had some products. It was just me and Dave Narajowski. Dave Narajowski eventually went to Apple later, but we actually have data directly over into China to actually build all of the data. And nobody had ever done that before. Nobody had ever taken a digital data right there, that we actually transferred it over there, and then they could actually build the actual products within that. And that was way ahead of Apple. I mean, no, I mean Nike. We were ahead of Nike back then, and it was it was totally inspiring.
When did you, how did you get connected with ACG or Nike? I guess this was pre ACG. How did you get in with Nike in the, I guess it would have been 89 or so. When did you start working there and how did that connection come about? Yeah.
So originally, see, every job I've ever had, every cool ever job, I got every job I wanted. For instance, I want I worked for Apple, and I thought I want to work for a sports company, and I love running at Nike, so I called directly to call uh, Phil Knight and uh, several of the different people in here, Mark Parker, and Mark Parker hired me. Then he brought me in to talk to him. So I was one of the first designers that they actually hired from Mark Parker. Uh, and he said he wanted to start a force basketball and to start ACG. And it was his idea he wanted to start ACG. And there were a couple other people there that were also part of ACG, and I was super excited to be part of that. So that's when it started early. But I told you the later, eventually, ACG became other things. For instance, ACG, and as you said, in New York City, they didn't know it all. It didn't mean all what is it, performance or whatever. It means what is it? Alcohol, cocaines, and guns. ACG. So it means for different things. And so I thought it was funny, but I think back then, in fact, you talked earlier on the other thing about the North Face and Nike. They were kind of connected in that way. In fact, back then, not North Face made most of their money was probably from making puffy jackets for people in New York City. But and I don't know. I think they still look up to ACG, and I don't know what's happening right now. But I think AC and Nike's in a little bit of trouble right now. But I don't know. We'll have to see. I think I still love Nike, and I think it's all about sports. That's what I wanted to do. That's why I chose to be that. I wanted to be part of the sports.
So what were your contributions to creating ACG? What did that look like for your end? What were those collaborations, those discussions like when you were creating ACG within Nike?
Well, we wanted to start to be um, real and authentic as an outdoor product. So we, gosh, I think that when we started that, I even back then, I don't know, you've probably heard of Lynn Hill. Lynn Hill is an incredible climber, probably one of the greatest climbers ever lived. But I met her and I actually climbed with her a little bit back then, and she came and stayed with us. She stayed with our house back then because she was actually climbing the El Cap where she was doing the nose. She was doing the first time, and I knew how amazing what she has done because nobody quite understood that she climbed the nose as a woman, and no one had. It's never been climbed by a man, and she did it probably 513 B or C. I don't know, and the reason I'm talking about that is because we wanted to be this truly authentic people, and that we wanted to do uh, with our outdoor product. We wanted to be true, authentic, and really outdoor. So it did, and I think I feel really proud of ACG. Um, I think it kind of went away from that. I think in the '90s for a while, or it wasn't very authentic very well in the future. And in fact, I even look at some of my stuff. I look at back at my other stuff in the past, like, oh, I wish I don't really like it. I wish I'd have done it better. Or what I do in the future? But I think the stuff that we created helped other companies because they always looked at Nikes and they tried to be like Nike and do something that's even better for themselves. So I don't know. Nike is a great company to help. I don't know. I think they just help sport everywhere overall.
What are some of the styles that you designed, some of the footwear that you designed while at ACG?
Oh, what are the best ones? Oh my gosh, I did.
Well, what are some of your favorites and just others that you worked on? Some of the footwear.
Well, probably the number one is probably the first sandal was the shoes, and because when I created that, uh, the marketing said no one's going to buy a sandal from Nike. Nobody's going to. And say it took a year and a half or 2 years just to get to be sold. They weren't going to do it because said nobody would buy it. And immediately they sold it and they made I don't know a little over 2 million people. I mean, too many sandals on one product. So it kind of blew everybody's mind. And we even had some really good runners that were actually running on the shoots. That was very satisfying. And I think some of the what is it? Some of it, the Arizona. I did some of the funny names like Arizona and the Air Utah, Air Wyoming, Air Wyoming. Those are super fun, cool products. They're very cool products, and they're actually humorous. I didn't want it to be too serious about
So
it.
did you come up with the names?
Yeah, yeah.
So is that so we have you to thank for all the Utah themed, like the Moab and the Utah and that connection to Utah?
Actually, you know what? The very, very first one I have to say was because I worked for Tinker's Hatfield. So it was his idea called Moab, and he spelled it differently than see Moab is Moab, and then so he big long one the longer one with two B's, and I thought it was funny and I loved it, so I supported everything that Tinker on that. So I just took that same idea and extended that into other funny products like Arizona and the Aristotle, all kinds of. I don't know. I think I liked it, and I think some of the people really liked it, but I think the management didn't like it very much. In fact, a lot of people didn't like me either. But that's life.
So this is something that's come up when we've interviewed other designers or founders or people who worked in the industry around this era and before. There seemed to be like a playfulness and fun and when it came to design or the marketing or even the naming of products. That just reminded me of that, with naming the products the way that you did. There's an element of fun to it. Did it feel that way at the time?
Yeah, I still like it too because I think at the back time you start looking at cars. It's like the X15 or something. All these different names that are kind of boring. They're all the same. So that's why I wanted to be something that was a little bit humorous and meaningful
Yeah.
in some
Yeah,
ways.
it's memorable for sure.
Yeah, I wish they had. In fact, I wish they would redo that. That Arizona, I thought was a great product. That was one of my favorites.
So you worked on ACG, but you did other product as well. So you did some basketball at the time.
I did pretty much all of Force basketball and did shoes for Dave Robinson and for Barkley. Uh, and so I got to meet both of them, and that was actually that was a treat as well. Yeah.
That's
In fact, I
amazing.
actually loving working for the different great athletes. In fact, all of the different people I've ever met were one-to-one people. Like if I wait for Steve Jobs, one-to-one, he's an incredibly cool person, but he's not that fun if you're 10 people together. It's not together. It's not that fun to be with them there. In fact, even the famous athletes, they're kind of jerks if you're in a big group. But when you're talking to one-to-one, they're really cool people.
what was the company like at the time? Like, what was the culture? What was the feeling? I mean, you started working there in 89 and leave in like 94. I mean, this is like peak Jordan era or like right before, it's right in the middle of Jordan. And, Jordan and Nike are really synonymous in so many ways in the rise of both of them. What was it like at the company? Just even like,
Nike felt like a small
yeah.
company, and it was. I knew most of the people there, and we were in that Nimbus place. We didn't even have it. We didn't have the campus there or anything here, and there was back in then there were a lot of people that were still East Coast. They had moved from East Coast and working in Oregon, and
Yeah.
it was small, and I really liked it too, but there was a lot of really funky weird stuff that were happening right there because that's what happened with because Jordan wanted to be work for Adidas. So when you find out what really happened later and became part of Nike, that's an incredibly good story about how that happened. So I actually were a lot of the same people that were probably part of the Adidas were still part of it. I mean, it's part of Nike, and they were kind of pushed out of there, and then eventually started at Adidas after that.
Mm.
And so Adidas was bigger than, and so was Reeboks was probably as big or bigger than Nike back then.
Mm.
But no, I think Phil Knight was actually afraid the whole thing was going to crash. He did several times. He thought it was going to crash. So
Well, that's a really interesting time to be there. So in 1984, it's the first Air Jordan, and you're there at 89, leave in 94. So what an interesting decade to be at the company. Probably a lot of changes. Um, Probably but very different from what we see the company being today. But really amazing to be in the middle of that.
yes, it is. And I still look up to the really good designers when they're very very designers. They weren't looking at other they were not looking at their designers the shoes, or they weren't even looking at the Adidas. They were probably looking at that for themselves about how do I create the shoe over in China and make it faster. In fact, I think a lot of the best designers were from Eugene. They were the original people that worked for Bowerman
Hmm.
back then, and I think that's probably the coolest part of Nike was the people from Bowerman.
Yeah.
I still work with them, and I still look up to those guys still.
So you referred to this time period on LinkedIn as Major League Swashbuckling. What, how would you describe? I think that's a good description, but what do you mean by Major League Swashbuckling?
Well, I think with a lot of the products, you had to find out what was your goal. What are you trying to do? Yes, we're going to try to sell more money for a product, but you want to something to actually make it something to make it happen. So you have to understand a bigger picture of how something's going to happen. So when I say swishbuckling, is because sometimes you might be completely full of, and you might be wrong, but you totally believe in an idea. And other times I totally believed in an idea because I knew it was going to work. So the swashbuckling is because you're figuring out how to make it happen and meet the right people to make this happen and uh, build it and test it and just I don't know. It was phenomenal. Like some products would happen, just bam, a good idea would happen, and other times you would take for 3 years to get to make a product the way you really wanted it. So
So where do you take your career from there? I think a lot of people would think Nike, that's the pinnacle, but I feel like you have so many pinnacles. You have so many peaks, and so many high moments. A lot of people might think, oh, that's like, that's the peak of my career is working for a company like that. You go on to do so many other things, but what is your next step post Nike?
oh boy, I don't know. I think it would be now for Americans to start looking at how the rest of the world is a little bit, we're all together, we're all connected. I think I think right now, I think Americans are a little bit too uh, they're one dimensional. They're thinking of they know everything about USA. But the more and more I traveled in the world, you realize how other places in other countries are incredibly sharp and figure out. I don't know. You learn so much from other people, and vice versa. They like to come and learn a lot from USA, and I think a lot of people outside still look up to a lot of wonderful, cool stuff from USA. But there's a time right now, I think, when USA needs to be a little bit smarter overall. Well, here's the problem. I wish I could tell you the story here, but what really happened is I think it's 93 or something like that. I got kind of mad because they had these they had to say what's the number one goal of Nike, and it used to be to help the athlete. That was our number goal. But at the point they changed that, they said they changed it and they said to maximize the profit for the shareholders. That's when they changed it. And that's when I got pissed off. I thought it shouldn't be all about that. It should be, yes, I should help the shareholders, but it should be more about the athletes. So that's why I quit in 93 back then, because I wanted to just start my own company back then. So then I was lucky to go work for Black Diamond, for Patagonia, for Burton, for Merrill. Oh boy, all kinds of different Fila, whole bunch of different companies. And I actually really liked working for other companies. However, that's the reason why I went back to Nike, because I didn't like working for a bunch of different other companies, because every company you work for, you have to think, your mindset has to think for the other people. So I had to think about the Patagonia thinking, or I had to think specifically about the Merrill people, or the Burton's people, and they're all very different. The people from Burton think very different than people in Patagonia, in a good way, in different ways. But it's that was hard for me, is it drains your body when you have to think like that for every one of your company. So think about, I'm working for 5 different companies, and you're trying to help those companies and try to understand their culture. It's draining, super draining. So I'm glad when I work back from Nike, I'm working for one company and do the best job for that. So
Yeah. What was the name of your design firm? Remind me.
back then it was MC squared garage, it's called. That was the first one. And then that was Faceplant.
Faceplant. That's right. Okay. That's the one I was thinking of.
And everybody thinks, why the hell would you call Faceplant? And back then it made total sense to me, because a faceplant means sometimes you have to do stuff and take some terrible crashes in order to get better at it. And that's why I like that faceplant, plus the idea of face plant. It's the face of the plant. It is it's just, it is the face plant. It's the whole big story overall. So, I was kind of stretching ideas on that, but I still believed in that. I think faceplants, I thought it was funny. And a lot of people hated that name, because you're basically saying that you're going to crash. It's like, yeah, sure, I'm going to crash, but I did a lot of great stuff too.
Are there any products or moments that stand out for you from these, designing for these different brands, whether it was Burton or Fila or Black Diamond, Patagonia? Like, are there any products or moments that you remember fondly?
All of them. I think that some of the best thing was to working with Scarpa to actually build the first telemark ski boot. So I actually built the product out of surfboard foam, and then I had to fly all the way to people in Montebelluna area in Italy and stay and work with them. And I got really sick there. It was terrible, actually, when I got sick. there, but it was it was incredible to work with the Italians because you're basically it didn't feel like a company. You were feeling like your family. And in fact, I actually would stay in their family. They were great at the Perazotto family. So that was a super inspiring to work in Italy and go climbing there. And what else? What are some other ones? I think Merrill was even fun because that was when I first got to meet Merrill. Back then, I was actually working in Burlington, so that's when I connected to Burton because of that there. So who else?
Patagonia. I know that you've shared some interesting work that you did for Patagonia or some concepts that were interesting.
Yeah, in fact, I sent that to you.
Mhm.
That little book I did for them is one of the most, and probably the most I'm most inspired about that whole thing. And it didn't happen. And that's another one where I've had some a little bit of squabbles with Patagonia as well. Which it's one of those things I love up to people at Patagonia, but I also think they did some really stupid stuff as well.
Are there any products over the course of your career that didn't happen that you still think about that you wish could have gone to market?
No, actually, a lot of the Black Diamond, those ski poles, the flip car, I did that with another friend, and that was really inspiring. Um, Even we did some of the original harnesses with Black Diamond, and I actually enjoyed working at the people at Black Diamond because back then they were actual real skiers and climbers that climbed every day and were making stuff there together. So that was amazing to work with all those people back then.
Well, and that was early days of Black Diamond. So they moved, I guess, in '89 to Salt Lake. Um, and then you started working there in '95,
Yes,
it looks
and
like.
I don't know if you know that story. Do you know the story
I
on that?
do. Yeah, yeah. But how it was Chenard Equipment and then the bankruptcy and then Peter Metcalf and the team come together and buy the company. And
Yeah,
I'm sure I'm missing some details though.
well, you know that was Jim Breadwell. He's a famous climber. He did a lot of the stuff in Patagonia and in the El Cap and Yosemite's. But he was climbing at the Tetons, and he was hired from an attorney to climb that on the Tetons, and he was part way up that, and he always some for some reason he would lead Jim Breadwell. He would lead his part, and then they would hire, and then he would bring up the next climber. But the climber below there, for some reason, he took off his harness so he could take a piss or take something there, and he fell off and died right there. And so that's why that happened. And so they were afraid. Patagonia was so afraid they were going to get sued on that, and that's why they bailed their Chenard equipment. So that's why they started Black Diamond. And I think that's kind of lame. I wish they would have stuck with it and stayed with it. But it was pretty cool to watch how the people actually started and made and turned it. They became Black Diamond from Patagonia. It was pretty cool. So that's why they moved it into Salt Lake City.
Right. Yeah. So you eventually go back to Nike and you talk about why that was. What did you want to do your second go around? Like, what did you want to do at Nike the second time? What were some of your goals or what did you want to accomplish?
Well, you know what? It comes back down into that deep ecology is that I was seeing there were so many shoes that were selling millions and millions of shoes and then just thrown away. And we used a lot of toxic adhesives inside of it and stuff like that. So I just thought, I said, I'm not going to change everything, but I should make better products. So my goal is to be thoughtful about products we're going to use. And back then, because I started back then, it was like around 2019, I think it was 2000 when I started back then. Mark Parker was actually pretty nice to me, and Tinker's the one that hired me to do that, to come in to head to work in innovation. And that was my goal, is to just make better products for athletes and make it a little bit cleaner versions of it. And so Mark Parker actually was very helpful back then, and they created parts of within Nike were very thoughtful in making safer products. And they, in fact, from 2000 and 2010, it was pretty amazing how much they worked for that. And after that, 2011, everything completely changed. After that, where they don't care at all more about the environment, and they wanted to just make as much money as they could make. And I think it's great to make some money, but they'll make plenty of money and do it in a safer way if they do it right.
So this era, there's Nike Considered starts. Was that you that got that off the ground, or was that kind of in motion already? This whole idea of Nike.
no, technically, I think I started it back in 1990. Back then, that's when I pushed that. I'd have to tell you that whole story about. I think we wanted to make better, safer products back. That was 2000. I mean, 1990, and I think it happened back then where I had the opportunity, where another guy that was an English guy, that he came up with the idea of considered design, and I jumped on that because I said it's a fantastic name, because considered is not like I'm telling you what you should do, but I'm saying you should consider it and understand it so you make better decisions. So considered design is just being considered and be thoughtful and make better products. But I think eventually it's inconsidered. That's what it is now. So uh, it was, I don't know. I'm glad we did that. I think that was like 2003 or something like that. That area, 3 to 5.
Yeah, and if you could describe some of the techniques that were used, I think you mentioned this a little bit, but I'd love. I mean, if anyone Googles Nike Considered, you'll see, you know, shoes put together without adhesive, right? The like no sew technology, weaving shoes together. I just really interesting ideas. Um, but if you could describe like some of the techniques that were used, that'd be great.
Well, okay, that was the original Chukka, and the reason I wanted to do that is as all of the shoes, they were actually more and more toxics and glues and adhesives inside of them. And if most shoes, you don't know, you look at a regular shoe, it looks like a pair of, looks like simple shoe on there. But if you look at it, you can see 3 or 4 layers of stuff underneath it, real thin layers of stuff. So when you say there's a layer, that means there's a layer and a layer, but then there's a layer of glue in between those. So it makes it heavier, and makes it more toxic, and those toxins go basically into your skin. So I wanted to say, let's try to do it with the fewest products. The actual, so sometimes could be 200 different pieces in one pair of shoes. So I wanted to make it simplified to maybe 5 or 10 different products, and then and connect the bottom to the upper without gluing it together. So we wanted to stitch it all together, or connect through a buckle or something to it. So that's why we chose that one, where I had the usually you have the foam on the bottom and then the rubber on the bottom. You have to glue those together. So I wanted to say, no, you don't have to glue them together. And think about it. Once I glue something together, it's like plywood. So it's glued together. It can't bend. But if you don't glue it together, it moves together. It just it's that's how a better product works, when it's not all glued together. So that Chukka, the entire product can be put together by one product. So, or one designer or one factory person. And we did have one guy or girl bought the whole thing for themselves. They had all there. They just built the whole thing together and stitch it together and wrap all of the webbing on the upper, the whole thing, the upper. That was designed by Mike Avini. Did that, so I did the bottom part, and I was really inspired and happy we created that thing. But I think what happened is Nike didn't do any marketing at all, zero, absolute zero marketing or trying to help the sale. Because sometimes normally like when they make a pair of basketball shoe, they're selling, they'll spend $2 million just to sell that basketball shoe. So I wish they would do that a little bit more in the ACG, where they would spend some of the money to tell the story, that's what I tried to do, and I think we did. I'm happy of it, but it was I've had wonderful successes, and a lot of things were really sad that didn't happen.
What's interesting, I mean, I have followed, there was another group within Nike called ISPA that came along later, and they released a shoe called the ISPA Link, and it was the upper would stretch around the sole of the shoe, in a very considered way, no glue. And it was interesting looking at that and just thinking, this came out in, I think, 2022. And I just thought, oh, there's some similarity there. There's some design language. There's some, similar solutions to problems that go back to what you were working on with considered design. So
I
some of
think
those
it's
ideas
cool.
are still floating around, it seems like.
I think it's cool. In fact, I think there's really good designers here, and I hope they don't get squashed in there, because Nike can still do some really cool
Yeah.
stuff.
So what did you end up doing after Nike? So you leave there in 2013. What does the rest of your design career look like up until today? I mean, what do you do after that, after your second
Well,
stint?
when I had the terrible stroke in 2012, it scared me really bad, because when I actually had the stroke, I couldn't even talk. I didn't know my wife's name or my daughter, and and everything I'd go to say, and no word would come out. And so I had to kind of relearn how to talk. And it's quickly how I can relearn there. It's because it's like, I think my brain, uh, uh, my head was completely fried from the stroke. However, luckily I have dozens of other brains in different places, and eventually I can reconnect and I can talk again. But I think my vocabulary is very limited. And then I used to be able to talk a lot. Now it's very difficult to have a long communication. But on that, I was really fortunate for Under Armour. They knew uh, that I'd been pushed out to Nike when I had the stroke, and they were really kind and brought me there to create. And it was actually quite fun working even in Baltimore about that. And some of the people were incredibly cool people there, like uh, Randy Harward. He was from Patagonia. He went in there Under Armour, so I got to work with some incredibly awesome people. And I left that, I think, I just kind of wanted to stay away, kind of move away from product design after about 2016.
Hmm.
So I tried to do it for another company, a local one. It didn't go out very well for that.
Yeah.
Freeform, I think it's called.
And so now you've been retired for a few years from design.
Yeah, I am. I'm very retired, and I play a lot now and do a lot more skiing, more mountain biking, uh, probably mountaineering and climbing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't have any regrets.
That's
It's great.
great. Yeah, well, I guess if you were to look back, No regrets, but what are your especially proud moments? What are you most
Uh,
proud of in your career?
well, I guess just because I did it honestly and never, I did exactly what I wanted to do. And most people would just go work for different people. And I work, everybody I wanted to work for, I did get that job. And I'm really proud of it. And I actually really liked all of them that I worked with. I worked Patagonia, Black Diamond, and Nike, and all of them. Yes, they're bad things about theirs in certain ways, but uh, um, I thought I had an incredible life as a product designer. I mean, my God, all the people I've got to work for, I'm so lucky. I'm really happy that I've worked for a lot of great people and really cool people, and I've learned a lot. And I still have enough. I'm not rich, but I have enough money to still go play.
Well,
And
thank you for
I'm glad to meet with people like you too from
yeah,
the University Utah State.
yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your archives with the university so more people can appreciate your work and for spending the time today to talk through your story because I think even more people will be able to learn about your work and just hear about your experience. So I appreciate you taking time to do this. This has been really great.
Well, thanks, Chase. Yeah, I look forward to it. Hopefully, I can meet you guys in Logan again soon and
Yeah, that'd be
talk
great.
about
We'd love,
it. I'd
love to have you
love to
back.